So, insofar as the more prominent atheist debaters are concerned, I think Matt Dillahunty would be considered one of the better, if not the best one out there, right? And in fact, he's absolutely awful, completely incoherent, and just garbage. And the saddest thing about all of that is that he has so many groupies who can't see the forest from the trees, right? So he's having this debate with Michael Jones is his name, I think so, and he concedes the debate within the first couple of minutes of him opening his mouth, right? And then takes an absolute pasting from then on for however long it takes, an hour and a half or so, right? And you got atheists in the comment section saying that, IP held his own. Michael Jones, right? Inspiring philosophy. Anyway, so the proposition of the debate is there reason to believe in God, right? Is the belief in God reasonable? And the Christian on the right, IP, Michael Jones, will obviously take the affirmative position that yes, it is reasonable. Thus, because this is a formal debate, Matt's job is to take the negation of the proposition and try to prove that, right? That it's not reasonable. Now, right off the bat, because if you just open your eyes, consider the topic for more than 5 minutes, and truly, truly come to this with an open heart, you'll see that there's a plethora of reasons to believe that God exists, right? Believe, right? Understand what it is that I'm saying here. And it's just so obvious, right, that this belief is reasonable if you just take the time to investigate this claim. So this is really, the debate is really unfair to Matt, because there's tons of reasons, obviously, right? But because atheists have been yammering on for a very, very long time how it's ridiculous to believe that God exists, right? Doesn't matter what your religion is, just the concept of God is just completely and utterly ridiculous. They set themselves up for this, right? So, I don't feel bad for Matt, but that's also why he took an absolute pasting in this debate. So what IP did, insofar as I understand it, is he's an idealist, if I'm getting this correct. Someone who believes that the mind is primary, if you will, right? That before there was any matter, before there can be any matter, the mind comes first, right? And then matter follows. Matt, being a materialist, he believes that matter is primary, and then, the mind is the function of the brain. Or it's an emergent property of the brain. Here, this is how I think of it. It doesn't have too much to do with the debate, but I'll give you my view on. I guess I am an idealist, you'd have to say. So when you look at concepts, and this is the one reason why it's reasonable to believe God exists, right? If you take math, for example, or truth, or the laws of logic, right? These are concepts that can only be held in the mind, right? Only a mind can conceive of these things, comprehend them, and use them, right? Which would lead one to reasonably assume that it must have been the mind that created them, or there has to be, because if, let's say, all of us die, right, all of our brains turn to dust and our minds are no longer functional, will 2 + 2 not equal 4 all of a sudden? No, that will remain reality, right? Meaning it's reasonable to assume that there is a mind, right, that guarantees these things to be true. The laws of logic, truth, in and of itself, mathematics, whatever the hell have you, right? Whatever the heaven have you. And that mind, right? If all of us disappear, 2 plus 2 will still equal 4, right? Meaning, what is this mind that guarantees these things, right? If only a mind can conceive of these, there must be a mind that guarantees these things persist even if all of us perish, right? And that's the mind of God, right? So the way I think of our brains, right, are the mind, right? Whether you want to say a collective mind or the mind of God or all of our minds, right? All of these concepts that are transcendent, right? Truth, logic, mathematics, things of that nature. That's the software, right? And our brains are the hardware that by means of, I don't know, something akin to radio waves or other types of signal, right? Our minds tune into, pick up, perceive, right? Or our brains are the hardware that tap into the mind of God, right? And us being made in the image of God, right? We partake in the mind of God. I'm not the most eloquent person at explaining this, but this is how I conceive of it, right? There's plenty of evidence that God might exist, that God does exist, right? I'm not saying incontrovertible proof, right? But evidence. Evidence that makes it reasonable to believe that God exists, right? So after inspiring philosophy makes a case for why it's reasonable to believe in God, because, according to all these scientific studies that he presents, the mind is separate from the brain, right? He provides evidence for this. And then he basically says that, the mind is primary, right? The mind came first and then the physical stuff followed, right? And that mind is God, or the mind of God, right? So he's not arguing for the Christian God. He is arguing for a basic theistic or deistic, maybe both, concept of God that most, if not all, religions agree on, right? Some kind of mind, all-powerful, right? Or a mind that guarantees, controls, if you will, the universe, right? And that came first, and then the matter followed. Things that this mind, right, that will guarantee all these concepts, even if all of us perish, right, somehow was created by the flesh. Oh my God. Anyway, so using science to back his premises, scientific studies, right, and then philosophical syllogism that makes sense of all these findings, IP makes a case for God's existence, right? He gives you reasons to believe that a God, some sort of a God, exists, right? And this is Matt's response.
I didn't time this out.
You bet.
So first of all, thanks for setting this up, and thanks to you for showing up and presenting that. I don't have any slides. I'm not going to be quoting anybody, and I'm not going to be, doing what I'm told I must.
Looking at Matt's forearms, I think and his arms in general, I think it's fair to assume he's never done a hard day's of work in his entire life, right? And that's exactly him in this debate, right? Whereas the atheists have been asking for scientific evidence for the existence of God, and IP brought exactly that to the table. Matt is just like, I ain't got shit. I ain't do nothing, right? He is that pigeon that's going to flip over the chessboard and claim victory, right? He brought absolutely nothing, not even a knife, to a gunfight, right? And look at this smug motherfucker thinking that his shit don't stink, right? Let's see what else he has.
One of the curious things in a lot of these debates is that people will present their case and say that, therefore, this is a good reason, or this is probable. And in order for me to, in order for my opponent to win, they must present a more plausible explanation. Well, that's flatly wrong. If the claim...
Keep that in mind, right? So IP makes all these claims. He provides evidence. And Matt says, I don't have to take his data, right? The things that he says are true. I don't have to debunk his premises or the data, right? I don't have to poke holes in his premises. Nor do I have to provide a different conclusions if I do a potential conclusion, if I do agree with his premises, right? I don't have to give an alternate explanation for the scientifically based premises and the valid, right, and sound syllogism that he provided. I don't have to poke any holes into any of this, right? So how do you win the debate? He just gave you reasons to believe God exists. And you're saying, well, I don't have to do anything? What?
Is there are good reasons to believe in God. I don't have to come up with better reasons to not believe in a God, or I don't have to come up with better explanations for something, because if there's a mystery in the world, and the correct position is that we don't yet have compelling evidence to say that we have come to a good evidence-based conclusion on that.
So he's completely misinterpreting the proposition of the debate, right? This isn't about incontrovertible proof for God's existence, but whether or not it's reasonable to believe that God exists.
Then that is the conclusion. And we are stuck in the position of, I don't have to have an explanation for something in order to be able to say that, hey, you presented something, but it's not quite there yet. As if we come across
So this is what Matt does in all of his debates, insofar as I can tell. Instead of being a debater, right, he frames the debate assuming the role of an arbiter, right? No. You're not the judge of the debate, right? Nobody gives a shit if you are convinced, Matt. The debate isn't to convince Matt. The debate is for IP to provide reasons for theism, and your job is to debunk those reasons or to explain his premises by giving an alternate solution, right? That's your job. This idea that you have to convince somebody, that doesn't make any sense, because IP could convince a whole bunch of people, and you could convince a whole bunch of people yourself. So who wins, right? How do you determine a winner? Some people will be convinced, and some people won't. So to say that you have to convince me, right? That's the only reasonable conclusion here, right? Because after all, it is Matt speaking, and some people once again will be convinced and others won't, so that gets us nowhere. Ultimately, what he's saying is, you have to convince me, meaning you can't win, because all I have to do is just flip over the chessboard, right? And I win. Is this the best debater y'all atheists got? Really?
Murdered body, and you have this. I don't have to have an explanation for something in order to be able to say that, hey, you presented something, but it's not quite there yet. As if we come across a murdered body, and you have this, you put together a case for the butler is the one that killed them. It's not up to me to come up with a more plausible potential killer.
Okay, so this is a false analogy, because when it comes to sentencing someone to prison or death penalty for murder, what we're really looking for is rock solid, incontrovertible evidence, right? Or the standard of proof is very, very, very high, because the consequences are that as well, right? What we're doing here is, IP's job isn't to prove that God exists beyond the shadow of a doubt. His job isn't to convince you, Matt. It's to give reasons for the belief in God, right? So this would be the pre-trial to the butler going on trial, and this would be the two of you deciding, right, arguing whether or not we have reason to believe that the butler did it. Are there reasons to believe that he did it, right? Does he have an alibi? Was he there at the crime scene? Did he have a motive, right? All of that, all of those are reasons for why he might have done it, right? But that doesn't mean that he did do it, right? So what you're having here is not the trial of the butler. This is the pre-trial. Once the butler's on trial, right, you lose the debate, Matt, right? Because there's reason to believe he did it.
It is only up to me to say either you have made a good case for the butler did it, or you have not made a good case for the butler did it, and here's why.
Right? He says, it is up to me to decide whether or not you win the debate. No, it's not.
When we talk about are there good reasons to believe something, it is a sticky topic.
No, it's not. It's very, very easy, as I explained already, right? But they have to make it sticky because the atheists have been sticking their goddamn feet in their mouths for so damn long. When you finally pull their whole card, right? They're just dumbfounded. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. So they have to just be absolutely dishonest and incoherent, right? And they have to confuse what a debate is, right? They have to raise the level of proof to an impossible standard, right? You have to convince an atheist that God exists. No, I don't.
Ultimately, you either are convinced or you're not. And becoming convinced is
That's a nothing burger. You either are convinced or you're not. What the fuck does that mean, right? I already talked about it.
result of not a conscious decision on your part. I'm going to just choose to believe this. You make choices and you make decisions as an agent, but you're not just saying, I am now convinced. It is something that you're compelled to do by the weight of the evidence and the weight of the argument. And we have to do.
So he's trying to make it seem like he is completely rational and reasonable, and like he's the fair arbiter of everything in the universe. And if you just provide, the right kind of evidence, enough evidence, he'll concede, right? You believe him, don't you?
This knowing that we can be in fact wrong, that we can become convinced of things, and that we may have good
fake humility,
good compelling
right? He's he's just conning people, man. Whether he knows it or not, he's just trying to convince perhaps himself that he's just an honest person looking for the truth, right?
Arguments and reasons for it, and ultimately the thing we're convinced of is not true. Once upon a time, it was
you believed God existed.
There were good reasons to believe that the sun went around the earth. Really?
Matt just conceded the debate. Right? He just conceded the debate. Once upon a time, there were good reasons to believe that the sun moved around the earth, right? Okay. So today, right? Maybe. According to IP anyway, and the stuff that he presented, right? There are good reasons to believe that God exists. You just lost the debate.
Good reasons to believe it. Everybody saw this and experienced it. Everybody who stood outside said, yep, there goes the sun. It's a direct observation. And the application of Occam's razor to a more parsimonious explanation would obviously have been that the sun goes around the earth. And if you asked me now...
And the obvious conclusion right now, if you look at the world as we know it, is that God exists.
Or ask me then, hey, are there good reasons to believe the sun goes around the earth? I would say, yes, there are. And yet we have better reasons to understand now that perception is because of the earth spinning on its axis, assuming you're not a flat earther. The thing is, at different...
Right, so the data, the things that were observed back then, it was reasonable to have this explanation that the sun moved around the earth, right? But because of the advances in, science and our ability to observe the known world, we found a better alternate explanation for why it appears that the sun is, orbiting around the earth, right? So whereas in the beginning of his opening statement, he said, I don't have to, right, provide alternate explanations for the data that you provide. I don't have to debunk any of your premises, right? And now he's saying that he does, right? Because that's how it's done. That's how it's always been done. This fucking guy's incoherent, right? At one point, it was reasonable to believe that the sun orbited around the earth. But then somebody provided a better explanation with better data and correct premises, right? And debunked that. So why are you bringing up this example while at the same time saying that you don't have to do that, right? You just said it's reasonable to believe that God exists because it was reasonable to believe that the sun orbited around the earth. But then it became unreasonable, right? Because of advancements in science and our ability to observe the known world better, right? That reasonable belief became unreasonable, right? And you're saying that just because maybe one day, just not me right now in this debate, right? Just because one day somebody might show that it's unreasonable to believe that God exists because they will provide alternate explanations, right? They were actually engaged in this debate instead of just slipping over the fucking chessboard and claiming victory, right? It's not reasonable to believe because one day I have faith, right? Somebody will do my job for me. Because look, this has been done before. It's just not up to me to do it right here, right now, even though I just agreed to do it. The guy's fucking incoherent. The guy is absolutely incoherent. Honestly, I mean, in his opening fucking statement, he conceded the debate and contradicted himself and piled a false analogy on top of it. Misunderstood and misrepresented what's being debated. Misunderstood and misrepresented what a debate actually is. Contradicted himself, provided a false analogy, and yeah, the guy's an absolute fucking clown. In his opening statement, he just fucked himself. How many times over? And people still think that this guy is some kind of an intellectual. Well, he is. That doesn't mean he's smart, right? He probably is to some degree. That doesn't mean he's honest. That doesn't mean that he speaks the truth. That doesn't mean that has a very high IQ, right? He just got the gift of gab, and he appeals to, I don't know, whatever it is that he appeals to in you. If this is how you respond to him, right, favorably, he must be catering to some need that you have out there, and it ain't the pursuit of truth, right? It's not logic, it's not coherence, it's not the ability to think for yourself. It's none of those things. So whatever the fuck it is that he does that appeals to the people that he appeals to, it ain't any of that. Because just in his fucking opening statement, right, he conceded the debate. And yet you got all these clowns thinking that Matt actually probably won. But IP held his own. Seriously, is this the best atheist debater you guys got? You atheists? Is this the best guy you got? Because he's an absolute clown. Thanks for watching.